On this slide, I'm going to talk about some specific typographic principles that apply to creating graphics for web use. So, up to now, I've talked about general typographic principles, but web is a different medium from print that requires some extra rules. A lot of graphic designers who were trained on desktop publishing back in the old days simply used the same principles when they switched over to doing web design. In many cases, it didn't work very well. This mainly stems from the fact that the dots on a printed page are generally much smaller than the dots on a display screen. Fine details that work well in print text do not work so well on screen. The resolution just isn't high enough. For web products, you need to design for screen readability, responsiveness, and device variability, and you need to prioritize scalability, accessibility, and clear hierarchy. Let users control their own reading experience. We'll get into a lot more detail on these in later slides. Use sans serif fonts like Arial, Helvetica, and Roboto for a body copy. It's scientifically proven to be easier to read on screens. Serif fonts are not ruled out for titles and headings, but it's best to use a display-optimized one like Georgia. The Calibri sans serif font is what is being used throughout this slide presentation. Use font sizes of 12-point equivalent or larger. Never use 10-point or less. Equivalent is an important qualifier here, which will be explained in the next slide. Remember the extended ASCII characters like curly smart quotes and em-dashes a few slides back? As I said then, you can't just paste them from Word into a web page. They require special HTML codes. Here are some examples of HTML codes for extended ASCII characters. em-, also known as the long dash, ampersands, and curly smart quotes, which curve according to their position before or after the quote. Here's the website that has all the codes for extended ASCII characters. As mentioned in an earlier slide, be careful, since Word replaces some regular ASCII characters with extended ASCII ones by default as you type. It does this under the assumption that you want a more professional typographer's look for your document. For instance, if you type a quotation mark, it may not appear the same as it does on your keyboard. It will appear in your document as curly smart quotes. All of this is fine, but if you copy and paste from that document into a web page, you'll probably get unreadable garbage characters. You'll need to translate these characters into HTML code. Your web authoring program may or may not do this. The safest bet is not to use extended ASCII characters in your original Word file. Here are some more typographic principles for web products. First, optimize for the baseline screen resolution of your target audience. If you're doing a project to be used in a specific corporate work environment, you could go with the resolution for standard monitors used in that office. But if you're optimizing for general public use, you need to use the universal default of 16 pixels. PX, by the way, stands for pixels. Note that we're talking about pixels here rather than points. Pixels versus points will be further explained later. The best practice for web design is to set font sizes with relative measures so that they're scalable. Avoid absolute sizing in points, which is the standard size measure for type used in print publishing. For web designs that are meant for the widest possible audience, use relative sizes that will scale dynamically according to the screen size of the various devices and display types that users are expected to have. As mentioned earlier, the default body text size for most browsers is 16 pixels. That's a safe bet, but even better is to set it to ems, rems, or %. You already learned what an em is. A rem is the root element's font size. It's a relative measure that allows the font to resize according to the size of the browser's default setting, which may have been set to higher than normal by the user if they have limited eyesight. The root element set by default in most browsers is 16 pixels. So if you doubled the size of the browser default size, then the font size would dynamically change to 32 pixels. Given all of the different mobile, tablet, and desktop devices used nowadays, with widely varying screen sizes, It's best to use ems, rems, or %. Rems is generally recommended over the other two. Using relative scalable font sizes will enable the font to dynamically resize according to device screen size, the browser window, or the user's resizing in system settings. Fonts cannot be resized by the user if points are used. Slanted baselines impair readability on web pages. They may be okay to use sparingly in print products, but don't use them for web products. Note that we showed the difference earlier between character orientation and baseline orientation. Don't underline non-linked text. It can confuse users who may think that they are links. In fact, underlines for links are generally a thing of the past. Use a standard link color and style for links instead of the default blue underline. Instead of underlining, use bold for emphasis of non-linked text. Use looser leading than for print products for maximum readability. I talked about this on the leading slide. You should use 130 to 150% leading for the web. The standard nowadays is 24:16 instead of 12:10 used for print products. Here's an illustration of the importance of using looser leading for display type as well as larger type. "24:16 equates to this CSS code. We talked about display optimized fonts earlier. Verdana, Helvetica Neue, and Tahoma are examples of common display optimized fonts that you can use. Avoid italics. Screens with their lower resolution than print do not resolve them very well. Make sure you establish distinct visual conventions for active linked text. Here's an example of use of an icon to indicate a type of link and a standard visual convention for active linked text on the right. In this case, it's a dark blue color with no underline. Visited links should have a different look than active text that has not been visited. Use these conventions consistently across your entire website or document. Be careful when adjacent words are separate links. Are these two separate links, one for each word, or is the whole phrase one link? Avoid having two separate links adjacent to each other. Write text so that separate links like this are separated by at least one word. Underline would solve this problem, but modern web design deprecates using underline.